latest in Azure DevOps with Joe Guadagno.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast, deliver quality, and run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything the .NET ecosystem has to offer. And lots of people are doing online user group speaking, and so if you run a .NET or Azure-related user group, reach out, including me. I love doing that. Our sponsor of this podcast is ClearMeasure. They make this podcast happen. And ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient and able to deliver world-class results. So if they can help, please get in touch. And if you're a .NET software engineer who wants a path to become an architect, ClearMeasure is hiring as well. And you can go to clearmeasure.com/careers. And before leaving that topic, I want to put out a call for a special role. I'm hiring another apprentice. I hired an apprentice last year, and he's grown so fast that he's already been promoted, and I'm coaching him through the next phase. But I'm looking for an apprentice to help with R&D matters and creating templates and guidance. And so if you'd like to work with me and have me be your coach, then please reach out. And also, last announcement, be sure to check out the new video show, Architect Tips, and we're trucking along with that. Now, our guest for today, longtime friend Joe Guadagno. He is the Director of Engineering at Rocket Mortgage, the nation's largest mortgage lender based in Detroit, Michigan. And he's been writing software for over 20 years. He's been an active member of the .NET community, serving as a Microsoft MVP in .NET for more than 10 years. And at Rocket Mortgage, he leads 3 software development teams building and modernizing internal services. And he's spoken across the United States and internationally on topics ranging from Microsoft .NET, Azure, Ionic, Bootstrap, many other topics. And you can see the complete list on his website, josephguadagno.net/presentations. We'll include all those links in the show notes. And when not sitting at his computer, Joe loves to hang out with his family and play games. And when not playing games with the family, Joe is checking out the latest in home automation. And so you can connect with Joe on Twitter at jguadagno, Guadagno, Facebook, Joseph Guadagno Net, and on his blog, again, at www.josephguadagno.net. And again, all those links will be in the show notes. But Joe, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I am doing well, Jeff. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since we chatted.
Yeah. You can say that about so many people, right? Going around the conference scene and user groups and public events. But you're going out to Kansas City soon for that big shindig, aren't you?
Yeah, this will be my second in-person event in probably, I think, December of 2018 was my last one, right? Or 2019, whatever it was.
I think, right.
Yeah, it was, and it's been a while. It was nice to get out to see people, but it was really weird presenting both virtually and in person, especially, with conference venues. The rooms are set up to be so large and hold anywhere from 100 to 400 people. And you go there and there's 15 people
for sure
in a room.
Yeah.
It looks weird.
Well, we can plug that KCDC conference in Kansas City. That's a good one. And that's been a long time conference. That's pretty big for just a regional conference.
Yeah. I think because it's one of the only ones in the middle part of the country. There are a couple, but they've definitely been the most consistent over time. I'm looking forward to it actually to see, people and, being able to catch up with old friends, make new speaker buddies. These conferences are like family reunions to some extent. Like I say, at the MVP summit, it's a family reunion, except with the family you actually like.
You talk about geeky stuff and nobody rolls their eyes. And then we're both speaking at the DEVIntersection Conference in December. You want to give a plug for that one in case people are...
Oh, yes. I have, I think this one I'm only doing 2 talks. It's at DEVIntersection. It's a kind of a shared conference. They do both focus on SharePoint, focus on Azure, focus on development, and SQL Server, kind of all rolled up into one. And it's a lot of different technologies. I think I'm talking on Azure Communication Services there, and migrating applications from .NET Framework forward. So it's always a great event. They do a great job. There's a lot of speakers there from Microsoft and other organizations.
Nice.
And it's Vegas, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. lots of after party stuff, I'm sure.
Yep.
And for anyone, I'm also going to be putting on a party with Palermo the night before the conference actually starts. So details for that to come for anyone who's been to one of those events at any other conferences.
Oh, that's awesome. I haven't been to one of those since the last summit, probably.
To get into it, there's people that have heard you speak, just been doing so many user groups, so many conferences over the years. But for those not familiar with you, I always like to ask our guests, how did you even get into programming, and what are the high points of your path?
So how I got into programming was really an interesting story, at least in my mind. When I was younger, and I'm talking like junior high school in the US, so I was probably 12-ish, 13 years. One of my friends and I started to working on building a computer from scratch. And that was before they had like things now where you buy motherboards and chips. You actually had to buy the copper board and, draw out the lines and etch it and everything. I got really into electronics there. And I started playing around in high school with my cousin's computer. He had a Commodore 64, and I used to modify it to kind of do different things. I would open up the programs back then in just a text editor, tweak them, and watch the results. So one day, fast forward to now, I'm like 22, 23, and I'm working in a store similar to what used to be a CompUSA, Micro Center, small computer store. They sold hardware and some software. One of my regular clients comes in to me and says, "Hey, Joe, I'm looking for someone to write an application for me. Do you know anyone?" I'm like, "Well, depends. What are you looking for?" It's like, "Well, I run a real estate company and I want something to track my apartments and houses that are going up for sale, et cetera." It's like, "Oh yeah, I can do that for you." I was like, "Cool. When can you start?" It's like, "Well, I'm guessing 2 weeks." So I was super excited. I went home to my girlfriend and told her, it's like, "Hey, I got a job as a computer programmer." It's like, "You know nothing about computer programming." It's like, "That's right. So what am I going to do?" We hopped in the car and went to her school, which was Hofstra University in New York. And I checked out a book on computer programming, which was based on Quick Basic. And I read through the book. And then, I showed up, 2 weeks later, proverbially, and asked the guy what he wanted. So I'm like, okay, go back to the book, start typing away, and ultimately ended up after 6 months or a year putting together this pretty awesome application that he later on sold to a couple other agencies. And then at that point, just went to another job, learned more, and just kept going to other jobs and learning more.
Nice.
So some could say my computer programming career started on a lie.
No.
Or just very ambitious on my part.
It started on confidence.
Yes, on confidence. I was confident I can do it.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, the industry it is the same. You're a programmer because you declare yourself to be a programmer. There is no central agency like medical school that gives you a license to be a programmer. Our industry is still very, very young in that regards.
And it's, even nowadays, it's still, I'm learning now just as I did, 25, 28 years ago, whatever it is. It's not like programming has stayed the same. Yeah, I could have been a Quick Basic programmer forever for the 3 apps that are there, but I'm always learning something new, whether it's Azure, AWS, or Uno platform, Bootstrap. There's so many new technologies that come out. You're constantly learning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Well, you've gone from being a programmer where you're coding all day, every day, and now you run several teams of multiple programmers. What caused you to make that transition, and what have you learned along the way?
I learned is I don't know everything, that's for sure. But I could have marriage taught me that too,
Yeah.
to some extent. So I lead 5 teams now, actually, at Rocket. And I think the transition was one of the reasons why I speak publicly and blog a lot is because I love to teach. Actually, when I was going to college, I wanted to go to be a high school math teacher. I love teaching people. It's probably one of the reasons why I got into programming, because it's very math related to some extent. And then got into public speaking and writing because I love teaching. So with that passion I have for teaching and, being an architect and a, senior, quote unquote, engineer, it has a natural leadership with it. So I was seeing that I was making more of an impact with people than me, slinging code 40, 80 hours a week. I was able to help grow other people. Now I have, 5 teams and I'm responsible for like 13, 14 different products at work. To me, I get more of an impact by watching, the change I've had on people's life. As a public speaker and a business owner, having someone come up to you and said, thank you for this. Like there's nothing better for me when it comes to the computer world of having someone walk up and say, hey, I attended your talk 3 months ago and it changed my life. I was able to do this, or I was able to save my time, or I got this promotion, blah, blah, blah. So that's really why I got into the leadership path, because I'm helping, affect not only our clients at Rocket Mortgage, but the team members that are, that report to me. I change their lives every day, hopefully for the better. Sometimes not so much, but
Yeah.
Such as leadership.
Yeah. Do you remember that we haven't even gotten into Azure DevOps yet? But this is interesting. Do you remember when you changed your mindset from the identity of I'm a programmer and I program all day, every day to, you know what? I get that I might not be personally coding all day, every day, but I really would like to enable other people now who program all day, every day.
Yeah. So I think I've been doing that for a while. Like when I started at Rocket Mortgage, I started off as a software architect. So that has some kind of, leadership ability or leadership portion to it. And then moved into leadership probably a year after that. But in my previous organization I was part of when I worked at Wells Fargo, I was a leader for a while. And I think it was right around when my kids were just starting to enter school. And I realized, I don't know if it was the time change with them moving in or just the maturity level with me, when I realized that leadership is more so what I'm passionate for. I mean, I still write code. I write code every day, it's not part of my day job. I do it because I love to learn and find it easier to help growing engineers when you understand the same language they speak. No pun intended.
Oh, yeah.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
Well, you're doing some talks on the product family of Azure DevOps, Azure Artifacts, pipelines, whatnot at KCDC. And we've talked a lot about that on the podcast. You not only help people through public speaking around those products, but you're also employing them with the teams that you directly manage. So I'm interested in your perspective. What is the state of the art with Azure DevOps these days that people just need to kind of be using, and how should they be using it if they're going after that product line?
So one of the things I really like and appreciate with Azure DevOps is how they really started to meld all the pieces together. Like in the earlier days with TFS, it was, hey, we have this tool that we want to use. And really it's just, as the phrase goes, lipstick on a pig. We just kind of prettied up Visual Source Safe, and then we started throwing things on top of it. Fast forward, 10, 15 years, for the last 4 or 5 years with Azure, Microsoft has really been concentrating on productizing a lot more of their individual pieces and then having them where they work well together. It's like if you look at the overall Azure DevOps within, the Microsoft space, they have the Azure repos, Azure boards, artifacts, test plans, all those things work together. But you don't have to use any single one of them. You don't have to use every one of them to be, an expert. Each one of them provides, some value to you. Like for a while when I got started, for some of my personal open source products, I was just using Azure boards to kind of track what I did. And then eventually I added Azure repos into it because I had some stuff locally, even though it was just me. I eventually moved on to the repos. And I was like, you know what? I got a lot of these things that I'm sharing back and forth instead of me, copying and pasting the code from this repository to that repository, or, compiling the DLL and then just sharing it across. Why don't I turn that into a NuGet package? So for the ones that were public, I put them in NuGet. For the ones that aren't, I started putting them in Azure Artifacts. So I have some Azure Artifacts that are just, for me to use within my personal projects. And then some I use in my public projects. And I'm like, well, this is a royal pain in the butt when you start trying to compile these things, because, I have to compile them locally and then, remember the commands to build them. And then, oh yeah, by the way, you want to sign those, which makes it even harder. And then keeping the public key locally and everything. I was like, let me look at Azure Pipelines. So Azure Pipelines does a lot of that for me. And that's actually one of the talks I'm giving on Monday, is how you can use Azure Pipelines to go and build it. So now I went from using a board, putting stuff in a repo, realizing that I need artifacts for it or packages, then saying I want to compile those into pipelines. Now, the only real thing left to do is to start throwing some of the unit tests I have in the dev test labs to kind of just reiterate it. But there's one other thing that's also in DevOps that's kind of seems like it doesn't necessarily fit, but it does fit to some extent. And it all depends on your area. And that's the Azure Monitor, which has had like 4 different names in the last 3 or 4 years. It started off as App Insights, then it went to Application Insights, then it went to Azure App Insights, and now it's part of the overall Azure Monitor, which is good. Applications Insights is one of my probably favorite of all the Azure tools that it provides, because it provides so much clarity into your applications, without using its name of insights. It really can, if you do it the right way, or even just do it plainly, you can see so much about your apps, how it's running, how it's performing, what the errors are happening, any exceptions. You can look at your client base. There's just so much you can do with it. And it's actually on all my public sites, use Applications Insights to help monitor them.
Nice. Do you use a lot of the custom events? Just curious.
Yes, I do. More so when I do demos, but I am currently working on an open source project for public speaking and events and podcasts where you can, it can monitor, your blog feeds, events, or podcast streams and take care of the social media spot for you to say, hey, I just released this new blog post, or hey, when this podcast comes out, it can announce it. So I started using custom events for that. Hey, this triggered, we have a new event added. So I can see a list of all the events when they happened, kind of like I would with events in like a Azure event grid or something like that.
Nice. Now you got 5 teams that are all using Azure DevOps. And I'm curious, and probably a lot of people listening are curious, what do you try to make a organizational mandate just to try to get some consistency across the teams? And where do you just let all the teams be different? How do you think about that?
So at Rocket Mortgage, we always like to say, use the right tool for the job. We try to avoid mandates or you must use this tool to a certain extent. Like we'll go through and say, our preferred programming language is .NET or PHP or, fill in the blank. But that doesn't mean you can't go and, use F# for this or Ruby for that. We're trying to avoid the sprawl, but at the same time, trying to keep it where you have that flexibility to do things. And in some cases, it works out really well where teams can find the right tool for the job. What I tend to see happen is we're broken up into what we call trains. Some companies call them departments, some people call them divisions, but trains are typically broken up into by like anywhere from 3 to 7 teams. These trains kind of have autonomy amongst themselves. So most of my things are usually all in the same flavor. Now that flavor might vary from like my team, my set of teams to your sets of teams, but they're pretty consistent.
Now, do all the teams actually use Azure DevOps, or do some use GitHub Actions or TeamCity? Or
some use GitHub Actions, some use TFS, some use other pipelines like Circle CI or others. For my team, most of it is in the Azure pipelines, but they're not called Azure pipelines because we still have, Azure DevOps on scene, and they're not considered pipelines yet because they're still TFS build scripts, so to speak, just because we don't have the on-prem version of Azure. But for the most part, that's what we use. We have some different deployment tools, so we don't deploy with our pipelines right now because of just security and certain concerns we have.
Gotcha.
We have separate tools for doing deployments.
Okay. Well, besides Azure Monitor, are there any other features where you say, hey, guys, for all the teams using Azure DevOps, you really need to implement this feature because it brings you so much?
Trying to think which ones we really have. I don't think there's any that have been like, you must use this one, or even this one provides a lot of value outside of probably, you already mentioned Insights, but I think pipelines is probably the second. And obviously we use TFS boards or Azure boards for pretty much everything now. I mean, you can't do work without it ending up on a local board in some way, shape, or form.
Oh, sure. And I'm looking forward to when Maui comes out. Of course, it brings all the Xamarin history for it, but with the App Center, I'm interested how they're gonna integrate App Center with Azure pipelines when it really was a product acquisition a while ago from the hockey app company.
Yeah, that kind of went nowhere for a while. least until you mentioned it, I was like, I haven't even heard that name in a while.
Yeah, it hasn't had a lot of buzz, but it's kind of the way to monitor Xamarin apps at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any mobile apps?
On my team, no, but at Rocket we do. We actually have a whole set of team / department, as others would say, dedicated to mobile. We have dedicated Android teams and iOS teams to build all the mobile apps. I think we got 6 or 7 in the marketplace right now.
What's going to be really interesting is the education curve for so many developers who have spent their whole career up to this point running all their code on servers that they could own and control. And they kind of came into the industry after the wave of desktop applications. And now a whole swath of programmers are going to have to learn, wait a minute, this is how I have to run the code when the code's actually running on somebody else's computer.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what a mobile app is.
Yeah. It gets that whole saying that, we grew up on, it works on my machine. It's like, well, you got 1,000 different variations of your machine now to try and figure it out and handle deployment. It's going to be quite interesting, especially as that market changes so quickly with mobile development and deployments. And, there are countless frameworks, even just outside of native development, for Apple or Android. You have Capacitor, Ionic, React Native, Uno platform. There's so many different ways to build mobile apps nowadays and having to be able to deploy them. And then Maui comes along that sits on top of a lot of those. It's going to be an interesting mix for the next 2 years or so. See what Maui does and the impact it has.
For sure. So what else are you speaking at the Kansas City Developer Conference?
So I'm doing a talk on the Uno platform, which I hinted to before. It's a way to use XAML and C# to build apps natively across multiple devices, including Android, iOS. And I'm giving a talk on application architecture patterns, which is always an interesting course because everyone, when people come to it, it's like, oh, I never realized that. It's like half the times you're doing something, when it comes to patterns at least, you're doing a pattern but never know it really had a name or really felt like a pattern, but you're constantly doing it over and over again.
Do you want to call out one of those patterns that aspiring architects should really know and really be using?
Well, the one on here that I would probably want to call out is what I call the cloud, the cloud pattern, or the not on my machine, which tends to be a pattern. But I think the biggest one that more people, as we start, we're talking about mobile and stuff, the event sourcing or the CQRS pattern for, command requests and query for being able to separate, because one of the problems that a lot of people have, and it's part of our training as software engineers, is that we're taught to do things very synchronous. Finish step A, then move step B, then move to step C. The world doesn't work like that. You can't guarantee that B is going to be complete by the time C is ready. So starting to get people into more of a event-based system of doing things like using Azure Grid or, any of the other comparable message queuing systems really helps out with that. That's when I spend a little bit more focused time on, because as we get bigger, you start doing things, like you look at the way Amazon makes an order. It's not, I click a button, an item goes in there, I click add to cart, it's good. There's like 17 different other things that happen behind the scenes, and it automatically assumes everything is going to work, then lets you know everything is good. You don't just magically say, okay, I did everything for it. So teaching engineers how to get more into that mindset and not just click, 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 and everything is done.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a great conference, and a quick internet search, you can easily find KCDC out there. Pretty easy to find. It's a pretty big conference. So awesome. Well, thanks Joe, for coming on the show and sharing what's going on in your world with us and how your teams use Azure DevOps. It's great.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Look forward to seeing you again and coming back on the show at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.